Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is a joint meeting of the Education and Culture and Planning, Housing, Economic Development committees. We are here today to discuss our Office of Legislative Oversight report on youth workforce and the impact of COVID-19. I do just want to share with my colleagues, and then I'll turn it over to my co-chair, and then we will go to our colleagues who may have any opening remarks. This report was requested pre-COVID. It was actually an opportunity for us to start looking at some of the concerns we knew and some of the concerning trends we knew were occurring when it came to teen employment. We know that the jobs that are lower skill jobs are actually decreasing in number via technology infusion. Just go to your local McDonald's and see that the kiosk that's there that allows for you to order at the kiosk instead of talking to a person, your mobile app that many folks may use to order and pre-order means that folks just need to take your delivery and don't need to actually take your order at the drive-through speaker that's there. That's just a symbol. You go into any one of your grocery stores or retail stores and you see that self-checkout is there. Those are folks who used to have those jobs. It's interesting because a few years ago, we used to talk about the fact of the folks who bagged your groceries and how we had grocery baggers. It wasn't that long ago. And that was actually an employed position with many of our grocery stores. Those have long been gone. And so those are oftentimes jobs that are filled by a lot of our youth. They give them the initial foray into employment. I'll tell on myself that actually my first job was working at McDonald's. And worked my way up. And some of those folks who I worked with, I still know. In fact, one of them goes to my church and is very close to my family and I. And so it really speaks to so much more than just the experience you get from when it comes to gaining work experience. But you also have a foundation for social interaction that sometimes can last a lifetime. It's very interesting. And so we need to think about all of those in context when it is that we're talking about what people lose. Oftentimes when we talk about joblessness, we often go straight to the money and say that the money is a huge impact, which it is. There's no question. Many folks are looking for these jobs to help make sure that they can help their families keep the lights on and put food on the table. Many young people are a part of the structure when it comes, the familial structure when it comes to making sure that families can make ends meet. And so when we don't have those employment opportunities, those families suffer as a result. But there's so much more that's at stake than just that. And so I want to make sure that we recognize that as well. When we talk about our school to prison pipeline, have a conversation with Luis Cardona, who heads up our street outreach network, and he will tell you that one of the major concerns that they have, and I know our Department of Recreation knows this all too well as well, is that when our children don't have these kinds of opportunities to be productive, their energies sometimes go in other directions. And so we're talking about the criminal element. So we're talking about school to prison pipeline. It's not just about our police and our police interactions. It is about the fact that we're not able to give them some of the other things that are necessary to keep their attention in a productive manner. And so from that perspective, we've got to pay very close attention to all the surrounding challenges that are associated with us not being able to employ our kids. I wanted to give some shout outs to some of the folks that are here with us today. I mentioned the Department of Recreation and want to thank Ms. Clutter for being here with us, as well as Marhonda Williams. The Department of Recreation has been so creative and so innovative in terms of its outreach, really trying to work with our children, but especially Councilmember Navarro is the one who put me on to TeenWorks. I'd heard about it, but had never been. And I remember we were at a graduation together and I fell in love. And I was like, this is the program. And it's actually, TeenWorks is the impetus for Summer Rise. Let me just be very clear, because it was working in conjunction with WorkSource Montgomery leadership at the time, Dr. Ellie Giles, that at the gym, I had said, why do we have this TeenWorks program in the District of Columbia that only serves a few of our students, but not everybody? And DC has this robust employment program to ensure that all of its young residents can have a summer job. I said, we need to do something like that. And she was like, well, let's do something better. Let's build it. And we built a great program. And Summer Rise is an amazing program that I know Councilmember Jawando will be joining us and talk about, his role in the Summer Rise program and leading that program. But certainly really want to thank our partners, Ms. Jablo, who I think is on the line, as well as Ms. McKenzie and Ms. Vanderwerf, who are also on the call for their leadership in continuing. But also really want to thank Ms. Chang Baxter from MCPS, who took over the program last year and has been a true stalwart in terms of making sure that MCPS stood this program up and ensured that we were still meeting the needs of our students. So really want to thank all of you for all of your roles. And of course, Montgomery College, who's on the line, who does great when it comes to providing the resources that are there. I see you, George and Steve. This is a true partnership, one in which we know that we all have to work together to make sure we're providing these opportunities for young people. Because unfortunately, in the place that we find ourselves in, and I'm talking about pre-COVID, these are not self-made anymore. We could count on structure and, well, it was structure back then, now it's Express. I'm dating myself. But and all these mall stores to employ all of our students. And you just go there and you could walk around to the multiple stores and, get a job. It was easy. It wasn't a challenge. That was back in the day when I was in high school. Now, things have completely changed. As I walked around Montgomery Mall 2 days ago and just took in the number of stores that were closed, the number of stores who had no one in them, I actually had people approach me as I walked through the halls asking and saying, hey, do you need a t-shirt? Hey, do you want to take a look at some of the specials that we have? Never, ever, and I'm born and raised here in Montgomery County, have I walked through Montgomery Mall and seen Montgomery Mall like it was. And that's what's happened via COVID. So COVID's made things even worse than they were before. And so it is incredibly important for us to react now, to try and make some strides now in terms of reconnecting a lot of our youth with some of these employment opportunities and building employment opportunities with our existing economic structure through small business as well as some of our larger businesses to make sure that our kids have what they need to pave the pathway for success in their future endeavors. So I talked a lot, but I haven't even barely scratched the surface of what is at stake here, what it is we're challenged with, and what it is that we have to do. So I'm going to turn it over to Chair Reamer for some opening remarks, and then turn it over to my colleagues for any opening remarks they have before I turn to our great Office of Legislative Oversight and Stephanie Bryant, who's done an amazing job in compiling this report. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you, Chair Rice. I'll try to be very brief, but your comments, first of all, reminded me my first payroll job. Like I worked in contracting, landscaping and stuff, but the first job I ever had where I got a regular paycheck was in a video rental store. Those don't exist anymore. The reason I think it's relevant here, as you said, is that COVID is going to disrupt the economy in a lot of ways, and we know that many of those jobs are not going to come back. And that's the crisis context here, is that companies are going to be inventing how to get by with fewer workers in restaurants and in retail. And so, we need to step up our programming to help people find other pathways to jobs and careers. And, I think this is a good time for us to be investing more in the tech talent pipeline programs that we've worked on together, and finding ways for people who are out of work now and may have a little time to take some courses in various kinds of IT related work that we know more transition to the digital economy, just to cite an example, and there are so many examples that all of us could put on the table. But I think the big picture, as you said, this is a moment of tremendous disruption. It's going to bring a lot of change, and the job market's going to be very different. We don't know yet what that'll be, but we're going to have to be ahead of that curve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Reamer. I couldn't agree with you more. I don't see any messages from my colleagues. So I'm going to turn directly to going into the report and want to turn to Ms. Bryant. I would just say a little bit of housekeeping notes. If folks do want to, I am actively monitoring the participant screen. So if you use the raise your hand feature, it'll allow me to be able to recognize you, especially for those who don't have my cell phone. So my non-council colleagues, for my council colleagues, just please feel free to just text me and I'll make sure that I add you to the list. And Councilmember Navarro, I got your note, so we're good to go there. All right, so let me turn it over to Ms. Bryant.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Bryant with the Office of Legislative Oversight. I appreciate this opportunity to brief the PHED and ENC committees on OLO Memorandum Report 2020-12. I want to thank Recreation staff and stakeholders in assistance in completing this report. Council requested this report in order to better understand national and county youth employment data and the impact of COVID-19 on summer employment. To do so, OLO analyzed U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and U.S. Census data, conducted stakeholder interviews, and researched the impact of COVID-19 on summer youth employment programs. Today's presentation has three parts. First, definition of employment and employment measures used for this report. Second, data findings and takeaways. And third, next steps. First, definitions and employment measures used in this report. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics defines employment, unemployment, and age as part of its monthly current population survey. OLO used these definitions to describe labor force data and how it applies to youth. BLS considers individuals employed if they are engaged in paid work during this survey time period. This includes regular, full-time employment, part-time and temporary work, and individuals who are temporarily absent from work for a variety of reasons. BLS considers individuals unemployed if they are either not working but on layoff awaiting recall, or not working but actively looking for work and available to work. BLS defines the labor force as all workers 16 years or older who are employed and unemployed. For this report, OLO focuses on two groups of workers. Youth, which includes all workers ages 16 to 24. OLO characterized youth into two subgroups, teens ages 16 to 19 and young adults ages 20 to 24. Working age adults includes all workers 25 to 54. OLO selected this group based on research studies comparing employment between youth and prime-age working adults. OLO examined youth workforce trends at the national and county level using three measures defined by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. These measures, when taken together, provide a picture of the job market. The first is labor force participation rate. This is a measure of the active workforce. It includes those employed, actively seeking work, and unemployed individuals. The rate is impacted by economic, social, and demographic trends. The second is the employment population ratio. This is the proportion of the population who is employed. And finally, the unemployment rate, which is the portion of the labor force that is jobless, looking for work, and available to work. A couple of notes on the OLO analysis. OLO reviewed 2019 national and county youth employment data to understand pre-pandemic trends. And also, this analysis did not evaluate the impact of minimum wage laws on youth employment. Turning to OLO's data findings. Today I will discuss three areas. First is 2019 U.S. youth employment data. Second, 2019 county-specific data. And third, a discussion of COVID-19's impact on summer youth employment. First, U.S. youth employment data. The following uses the Bureau of Labor Statistics 2019 current population survey to explore employment trends among youth prior to the pandemic. In 2019, compared to working age adults, youth ages 16 to 24 were less likely to participate in the labor force. Youth had a lower employment population ratio than working age adults in 2019, meaning they were less likely to have jobs. And youth who participated in the labor force were less likely to find jobs than working age adults in 2019, represented by the high unemployment rate. When comparing national employment data among teens and young adults, in 2019, young adults participated in the labor force at a higher rate than teens. About 2/3 of young adults had jobs compared to about 1/3 of teens. And young adults had a lower unemployment rate compared to teens, but one that was still higher than working age adults. OLO examined BLS 2019 national race and ethnicity data for the youth workforce. Nationally, the data show that for both teens and young adults, white and Latinx youth had the highest participation rates in the labor force. Overall, white youth were most likely to have jobs, followed by Latinx youth. Both Black and Asian youth were least likely to have jobs in 2019. Nationally, Black youth were less likely to participate in the labor market compared to white and Latinx teens, and at the same time had the highest unemployment rate for both teens and young adults, meaning those who entered the labor force were the least likely of all to find employment. OLO also examined long-term youth employment trends, focusing on 2009 to 2019 and the impact of the Great Recession. Of note, nationally, the labor force participation rates for youth workers have not rebounded since the Great Recession. Teens, in particular, were participating in the labor force at a lower rate in 2019 than at the beginning of the recession. Researchers have attributed this declining trend to several reasons, including experience and job availability. There are fewer entry-level jobs coupled with a greater emphasis on experience, and this increases competition for available jobs. And youth are often the last hired and first fired in poor economic times. Increase in educational activities. Youth are increasingly participating in educational activities like coursework or unpaid internships during the school year and the summer. This reduces the available time for paid work. And geography. Geographic isolation from fast-growing, job-rich areas impacts opportunities available to youth. Second discussion area is 2019 youth employment data in Montgomery County. As previously noted, OLO felt it was important to discuss youth employment data for the year prior to the pandemic to better understand trends. The U.S. Census reports annual worker demographic data at the county level. In the county, comparing working age adults to youth ages 16 to 24, in 2019, youth were less likely to participate in the labor force than working age adults. Youth in Montgomery County were 2.8 times more likely to be unemployed than working age adults. In 2019, the youth unemployment rate was 10.1% compared to an unemployment rate of working age adults of 3.6%. Similar to national trends, in the county, young adults were more likely to participate in the labor force in 2019. 3/4 of young adults had jobs compared to 1/3 of teens, and young adults were less likely to be employed compared to teens. OLO examined the demographics of youth workers in the county. Labor force participation rates in 2019 were the highest for Latinx youth at 67.7%. Black youth had the lowest labor force participation rate of 52.8%. In the county, similar to labor force participation, Latinx youth had the highest employment population ratio, meaning they were the most likely to have jobs in 2019. Black youth had the lowest employment population ratio, meaning they were less likely to have jobs among their peers. Black youth had the highest unemployment rate of 18.2% in 2019, meaning those who entered the labor force were the least likely to find jobs. Asian youth had the lowest unemployment rate. OLO examined the unemployment data further. Across all youth, teens had higher unemployment rates than young adults. Black teens had the highest unemployment rate among their peers, with 40.6% unemployed in 2019. The same trend was for Black young adults as well. Go back. Yeah, the similar trend then for 2019 was also that Black young adults also had the highest rate of unemployment among their peers. The census data also reports annual worker data at the county level by industry. Here, employment represents the number of county residents who work in a particular industry, not necessarily geographic location. In 2019, 71% of county youth were employed in 4 industries: food service and entertainment, retail, education services, and professional and scientific services. Looking at teens and young adults, 51% of county teens were employed in food services and entertainment, and just over 40% of young adults in the county were employed in two industries, food services and entertainment and retail. The third discussion area is COVID-19's impact on summer employment. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports annual data on summer and youth employment. The data examines the employment between April and July each year, when most high school students and college students seek summer employment. The following is national data from April to July 2020. White youth had the highest labor force participation rates in July 2020 at 59.4%. Asian youth had the lowest participation rate at 42.9%. Compared to July 2019, Black youth had the largest decline in participation in the labor force from the previous summer. Leisure and hospitality industries, which includes those critical food services and entertainment industries I mentioned earlier, lost 1.1 million youth jobs this summer compared to 2019. That's about 21%. Education and health services, which includes childcare, lost 930,000 youth jobs compared to 2019, which is about 33%. And the retail trade down there at the bottom of the chart lost about 89,000 youth jobs for summer employment. The unemployment for youth typically increases in the summer months as more youth enter the job market. In July 2020, there were 4 million youth unemployed. This is 1.9 million more than in 2019. In July 2020, white youth had the largest decline in unemployment rates, falling 9.1 percentage points from April to July 2020. In contrast, Black, Asian, and Latinx youth in the labor force experienced smaller decreases in unemployment rates as economic activity resumed during the summer months, meaning those who entered the workforce were less likely to find summer employment. Communities around the country implement summer youth employment programs to help youth gain work experience and build necessary skills. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, many jurisdictions did not offer summer employment programs this past summer. However, some communities like the county pivoted quickly to provide limited in-person and remote employment opportunities for youth. The following is a summary of the county's COVID Corps program. Due to COVID-19, as I mentioned, Department of Recreation's Teen Works program did not operate in summer 2020. In its place, the Department of Recreation started the COVID Corps to aid county economic recovery for youth ages 16 to 24. Recreation staff reported that the original budget for the program was $500,000, with program costs totaling $443,000 as of late October and the writing of the report. This funded approximately 22,000 hours worked by Corps members from July to October and about $2,500 in operating supplies. Participating youth earned $14 per hour. Due to overwhelming response, the program closed application registrations during the first week. Of the more than 1,300 applicants, 1,100 were eligible and offered a preliminary online interview. In total, 132 youth participated in the program, with 68 working through the fall months. Participants spoke over 22 different languages. The majority of participants in the program were female, and 76% of participants were between the ages of 16 and 19. The program partnered with over 20 host organizations to offer work experience this summer. The positions focused on areas of food security, community outreach, and multilingual support, tech connect, and operational recovery. The programming included opportunities to build soft skills necessary for workplace success and offered youth opportunities to run online courses through Montgomery County libraries. Recreation staff noted that one of the benefits of offering virtual internships this past summer was that it expanded opportunities to youth who did not have transportation. For example, youth residing in the Up County participated in internships down county and vice versa. Without these virtual offerings, this opportunity would not have been available in the past. Staff also noted that the virtual component could continue as part of TeenWorks. However, this would require additional funding. Overall, OL identified 3 next steps. The first is to explore opportunities to expand remote job opportunities for youth as part of TeenWorks. The second is COVID-19 has resulted in job losses in the food service and entertainment industries. These sectors employ the most youth in the county, and so it'll explore opportunities to bridge county programs that support restaurant and retail businesses with those employment programs that support youth in the county. And third, further research is needed to understand why Black youth unemployment rates are so high compared to peers in the county, to understand best practices for improving Black teen employment, and opportunities to implement best practices. Thank you, and this concludes the presentation, and I will turn it back to the committee chairs.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bryant. Sobering. Let me turn to Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to OLO. This was a really, really wonderful product. Ms. Bryant, you did an amazing job, and I also want to thank everyone who has joined us today, because this is a topic that requires this type of holistic approach. So I'm really pleased to see everyone who's here. As always, I mean, for me, this report is able to gather in one place a lot of the information and a lot of the issues that I think we all have been attentive to and discussing for quite a while. Personally, this report highlights so many issues that committees, starting when I was a member of the HHS committee, even going way back when I was a member of the Board of Education, these things, these patterns, we have known about them for a very long time. I think what is important about this report is that it shows us how, because of the growth of the county and because of the growth of in terms of who we are, specifically a county that is becoming more and more diverse, the scale of these issues have become larger than we had been, I think, in the past used to discussing. Goes back to this notion of Montgomery County, in my opinion, being a jurisdiction where we continue to grapple with an identity crisis. We have got to once and for all acknowledge who we are, because that is how we're going to drive our policy decision making. And that is why racial equity and social justice legislation is so important, because now we're able to, in a very systemic way, every single time examine how we're doing with regards to all of these disparities. So this is how I come at this conversation. Councilmember Rice and Reamer probably remember the many conversations that we've had in the past about TeenWorks, Summarize, and some other types of youth-related issues. I've always been concerned about our scalability approach to this, that we create these really great programs, and they are amazing. But when you look at how much we're investing and how many young people we're serving, it's obviously not enough. I mean, to think that 10% of the young people that applied to this program, the COVID Corps, were able to realize some employment. You look at Prince George's County, and it's my understanding that, you know, they have invested something like $7 million for their Prince George's County Summer Youth Employment Program, which they quickly adapted to COVID-19. When we talk, as Chairman Rice said, about issues of positive youth development tied to this notion of employment, and we have been told time and time again by those who work with our youth in our communities that access to a job is the number one thing that our young people ask for. And so we spend a lot of time talking about at-risk youth and a lot of time talking about, you know, school to prison pipeline, but then we fail to really address at a scale type of approach the root causes of a lot of these issues. And so I'm so thrilled with this conversation, but I want to know what are we going to do about it? So what are the proposals here? And one of the things I'm thinking about is the fact that, you know, COVID-19 definitely has exacerbated this piece. And so just as us on the county council have worked so hard to respond to the COVID-19 crises, It seems to me, Councilmember Rice and Reamer, that we should be immediately putting together a type of COVID-19, youth employment special appropriation of some sort to begin to scale up. We hear a lot about the needs that we have in terms of, testing and vaccinations and outreach and things of that nature. We're constantly talking about that challenge. But then I think that we have some opportunities to find some common ground here. And so I'm, I appreciate the report, but obviously been here for that, have heard this before, see how it has just become exacerbated. I'm really eager to get to work on some possible approaches that are substantial, that are, just as our partner jurisdiction, Prince George's County, of that kind of scale that we can then sustain year after year, like we did with our early care and education initiative. So just wanted to make those remarks and then maybe hear from our partners what they might be thinking in terms of some elements that we can then put together comprehensively, and maybe at the end of the session, maybe an ask to our staff to work on a particular proposal with targets, just like we did with the early care and education initiative, to get us going. It is heartbreaking to see the disproportionality when it comes to our Black teens. That is really heartbreaking and unacceptable. So we got to respond, and I, again, just really look forward to working with each and every one of you to get going and begin to provide some of these opportunities for our young people. Lastly, I'll say, again, in terms of the disconnect of who we are, let's not forget that for many of these young people, it is not just about pocket money. This is not just, so I can buy a few things for, some makeup or something like. This is about helping their families, meet the pay bills. This is about, making a contribution, and we need to be aware of that. That this misperception that Montgomery County is just this rich county where, everybody has like mom and dad to drive you around. All we have to do is look at the farms rate in the school system, our ever farms rate. We know who we are. And so therefore, I think it's shameful for us to not be responding at that level and in terms of those numbers. We can do this. And again, I would like to hear them from, our partners. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, how you want to do the
Yep. I'm
rest of the conversation,
monitoring.
but like to get to some proposals that we can then act upon very quickly. Thank you.
Excellent. So I see that Ms. Chang Baxter has her hand raised.
Thank you, and I apologize. I am going to have to hop off this call. I can attempt to call in from my car. But one of the things we definitely need is help from the business community and a system to help bring businesses to the education table. Montgomery County Schools, Montgomery College, USG, UMBC, whether it's the Talent Ready effort or any other efforts that we're working on, we're aligned. We're pretty good about aligning, but we need help with businesses. We are chasing businesses on our own. We know that Montgomery County has different chambers, different rotaries. You've got Ready, you've got MC, Montgomery County Chamber. We have so many business entities, small business association, construction associations, trades foundations. They're all over and they're all great. But how can we have the business community better help work with us to bring these opportunities to our students? And then how can we create a one-stop shop portal, if you will, for the businesses to interact with the educational institutions? I am very happy to follow up with staff, but I do need to hop off the call. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to working together.
I don't know if we lost the chairman.
Yeah, I think we lost the co-chairman. I don't know, Chair Reamer, if you want to take over.
That's why I'm here, I guess.
I was trying to get in the queue too. So
Yeah,
okay.
I texted him also earlier and was in the queue, but
Well, we have no records of who's in the queue first, but I'll go
I
to
defer
Mr.
to Mr.
Dwanda.
Friedson. No, I defer to Mr. Friedson. I just popped in, so I'm sure he was before me. I'll go after him.
Okay, there he is,
Oh,
Mr.
Sorry
Rice.
about that, guys. I apologize.
That's all right. We were
Broadband connectivity.
gotta get that 5G. We were going to call on the next speaker, who may be
Yep.
Mr. Friedson.
Yes, it is.
perfect. Thank you, Mr. Joando, and thank you to the co-chairs. This is both a scientific confirmation of, unfortunately, what we've already known, and staggering to read at the same time. And it reflects what, I've said a lot, that the only thing novel about the coronavirus, the only thing new about this pandemic is the novel coronavirus itself. And these are not new issues. It has just taken those cracks that already existed and it has blown them wide open, having a very disproportionate impact on different groups of people, and no more obvious and no more significant, unfortunately, than young people of color and older people of color, and at both ends of the spectrum. And it's a crisis now. It's going to be an even greater crisis later, because particularly when we're talking about our youth, these missed opportunities, they don't return. They don't come back. We miss the chance for enrichment opportunities, whether it's early childhood education or adolescents to have job opportunities. Their wages for the rest of their lives are impacted. Their skills for the rest of their lives are impacted. The compounding impact of what this means for their lives, their careers, their earning potential is devastating, and it's compounding. And it's just like savings and investments and college savings. The families that can do it early on, can't are well off, and the families that can't catch up. And that's why interventions like this are so critical. I'm pleased to see that there are some positive models in other jurisdictions that are much more robust than ours, because it provides us a model for what to do. I'm disappointed in the fact that there are so many places, even within our own state and within our own region, that are just doing so much better at this than we are. And so I think we need to step up our game in a significant way. I would just say, I really appreciate Councilmember Navarro's comments about the fact that this isn't pocket change money. I was going to say that, for me, my youth employment was a luxury. It wasn't a necessity, but it was so important to my professional development. And it is such an important part of where I am today. I worked, 120 hours working for an ice cream distributor. And the work ethic that I learned, the skills that I learned, the relationships that I gained were invaluable to me. And my family, fortunately, didn't need the hourly wage that I was getting. And frankly, I was a good deal because I worked so many hours and did so much, and I wasn't very expensive. At that point, I kind of look back and think that I should have negotiated for more if I knew that you were supposed to negotiate for more money, which is why that was such an important part of where I was. And so it's not just about the fact that it's a luxury versus a necessity for families that need the money then. It's about what it means moving forward for the young people who have these opportunities and who don't. And that, to me, is the biggest lost opportunity that we're going to have. And the failure to intervene now is going to have devastating impacts, not just on individuals, but on our community, on our social fabric, and our economy moving forward. And so I just totally agree that we need, significant plans. I do think if we think about, what the appropriate areas for stimulus would be, this would be a good area as we think about COVID and any federal money that comes in. It's one of the reasons why I don't think we should be banking on federal money, frankly, to fill budget gaps, because we need to do things like this to provide, the shot in the arm, along with the proverbial shot in the arm to the economy and to local residents, along with the literal shots in the arm through the vaccine. And so I think this would be a perfect example to focus some of that efforts and to really work hard on that. I will say, in terms of Ms. Chang Baxter's points, which I think are really important, I think our businesses are dying to help. I think that we have not provided good opportunities and clear, consistent ways in which they can help. I think this crisis has shown us that in terms of the number of businesses that stepped up to be part of the public health response with PPE and otherwise. The second we provided them those opportunities, they jumped on them as quickly as they possibly could. It's our job to create those opportunities, and it's not just about money. It's about, creating the critical mass and the framework to say, okay, every employer, if you want to be part of this new program, if you want to help our young people, here's how you do it. Make it simple, make it easy, make it consistent. And I think we need to do that. We need to do that yesterday. And the portal, creating that should be our responsibility in the public sector, at least facilitating that. Who in the public sector? Let's talk through that here. But I have no doubt that the private sector and the business community will step up if we provide the framework and the infrastructure for that to happen. And frankly, I think they'll come up with some of the dollars in order to do this too. But we have to create the infrastructure and the system in order to make this happen so that we can scale this up, because $500,000 and the number of students that we're reaching, it's just not going to cut it. It's certainly not going to cut it for what we need moving forward. And it doesn't cut it for what we need now. So I think we're all in agreement here. I just want to add my voice to this. And, I want to make sure that every young person has the same opportunities that I had in this county and that have provided me with the opportunity to do what I've been able to do. And right now we're not doing that. And we have to do a whole lot better than we're doing. And I'm just very appreciative of this report, which really shines a light on this issue and to all of the stakeholders that are here. But do agree with Councilmember Navarro that, one step is identifying the problem, which we all agree on. Now we got to start coming together to work on tangible, specific, accountable solutions, and look forward to us moving the conversation along to get to that point. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Friedson. And, it is unfortunate that we find ourselves in times where we still have to continue to prove the issue that we have before us, that we know is fact. But that is what this report was about. It's the reason why we had requested it, to make sure that it was easily justified to folks, because we are going to, as Councilmember Navarro said, heavily invest in this. Look, what we've done is invest around the edges. Let's just be honest. We haven't given the support necessary for TeenWorks to be a strong, robust program. We haven't given the support necessary for Summer Rise to be a strong program to stand alone on its own. We haven't provided the resources to do that. We've tinkered around the edges. And so if we are to be intentional about truly creating something that addresses this, we are going to have to invest a significant amount of money in making something like this happen. I do see your hand, Ms. Clutter. I do have Councilmember Jawando first, and then I'll call on you next. So Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is, I can say this is my favorite committee because it's both my committees. So I'm in the,
although we do know which one is your favorite.
I'm going to take that as a sign of progress.
It's the only time that Chair Reamer and I get to be on Councilmember Jawando's favorite committee. So I appreciate the fact that it's joined.
Hey, well, it's progress, and I shouldn't. I just thought I'd throw that out there. But no, I do. This is such an important topic, and I really appreciate that we got Ms. Bryan and OLO for doing great work on digging into a component of this. We knew it was an issue. One of the frustrating things for me has been, and I remember as Councilmember Rice will remember, coming for the council to request money for Summer Rise so that we could put the program together and run it in its first year. If you think about how most students and young people, in our own experience, get access to employment, the internships, career-based, work-based learning opportunities, those relational skills, that's a lot of times the foot in the door. And I think we saw strong success to some of the things that Councilmember Friedson was saying. I still have the Washington Post article that was glowing about the Summer Rise program, where you had employers saying this was great and all the kids were awesome, and we had just under 500 kids the first year, and then obviously second year the program ran, and then COVID hit, so we couldn't have it this year. But the idea there was, in the summer, and we need to do other things. We need to build out TeenWorks. We need a whole comprehensive plan. But how do we at least have a comprehensive summer work-based learning opportunity that's open to all students. We have 50,000 or just under high school students. You think about the scale that's needed, and how do we tie our curriculum to make sure that all along the way we're getting kids ready to have those opportunities that are going to help them secure employment even when they come out of high school and get into that pipeline. And so, when you look at our numbers of internships, at a high school of 2,000-3,000, you have a few hundred kids that are doing internships. So it's just not at the level, and everyone understands that. And so, I do think we have some strong things to build off of. I think we can have, and I'd like to see this report, it's a little more digging into the summer, looking at what we did with Summer Rise. I think we can build off of that. I think that the COVID Corps was an interesting model. The Teamworks, we have other models. There are private sector models. Urban Alliance has been working in the county as well. And I think there's other opportunities to partner with them. I do agree that our business community and the nonprofit sector, and them included, and government, everyone knows how great our young people are, and that will make the opportunities available if there's a coordinated, easy way to get into it. And one of the things that we had started to develop with Summer Rise was that, people knew what it was. They knew it had a good experience. It was a defined time period. It was easy for people to say yes, and then people gave money. And so I think there's some stuff that we've done that we can build on to create a more comprehensive system. But I agree, if 40%, Black youth unemployment, you look at our Latinx numbers are not much better, and just young people in general, we've got a lot of work to do. But I do think we have the tools in place, and I'm really happy to see. I had a great meeting with Mr. Featherstone and at Worksource. I'm glad he's on board, and I think we have the component pieces, but we are going to have to make investments. So I look forward to rolling up sleeves with this group, not only today but offline, and sharing ideas about how I think we might get there. So I really appreciate you putting this together to the two chairs of the committee. Thank you.
So before I turn to Ms. Clutter, I have to apologize because I didn't describe another aspect of student employment in my opening remarks, and that is with our institutes of higher education. The levels are off the chart in terms of those who actually are employed while going to school at both Montgomery College and universities at Shady Grove. And so while we talk mainly about what's happening within MCPS, the reality is that continues through students' matriculation, oftentimes here in Montgomery County. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that as I see the hands of my good friend Robin from USG and my good friend Steve from Montgomery College, who I'll be calling on next. So Ms. Clutter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to take an opportunity to first thank the council. Your support has just meant so much to us in the Recreation Department. And I'll say this, I have not met a Recreation Department yet who hasn't relied on young people to be the backbone of what we're able to do in the service delivery. And I think that's really important to mention during this time, because one of the things that was mentioned was how COVID has exposed things. And COVID has certainly exposed the amount of social capital that the Recreation Department does build in the community, because when we don't have it, all of a sudden everybody's missing it. Not only for the physical and the mental well-being of our community members engaging in our programs, but we employ probably over 1,200 young people in our department. And where we talk about teamwork, which is so critical, and that's a learning program that we developed, a pathway to employment. We have lifeguards and camp counselors and referees and so many other young people that work for us in a variety of capacities. But one of the things that we realized as a department was the learn to work piece was missing, and that's how Teamworks kind of formed. We had a lot of young people who couldn't compete for even the basic youth employment opportunity, and who didn't have the support or the help or needed an extra hand. And that's how Teamworks was developed. And we're so proud of that program, as you know. And we're so thankful for the support that we've received. We've been partnering with MCPS and Miss Shane Baxter. I think that we can strengthen that collaboration as we move forward. And I do think, I know Councilmember Navarro talked about what are some of the solutions that we could talk about immediately. And there are some policy changes that could impact employment and benefit us, which is we're held up against what we call the 1040, which is 1,040 hours that our seasonal staff are able to work in a year. So, and we get right up to that mark, and then we have to tell people that you can no longer work with us for the duration of the calendar year until the cycle starts over again. And we do know that a lot of our young people are relying on the income that they earn to not only support their families or help to pay to go to Montgomery College and to do some of these critical things that they need to support themselves and their families. And I do need to just mention that Rhonda Williams, who's on the screen with us today, was instrumental in getting the COVID Core program turned around and launched in such a short turnaround time. And it really is a concept that was developed off the TeamWorks program that she's been phenomenal in just growing, developing further. She's added a volunteer component to that. So not only do we have a pathway to your first employment, so you have the TeamWorks program, which then could lead to other opportunities within recreation departments, county government, and other businesses. But now she's added a volunteer opportunity so students can earn their service learning hours and then graduate to either a TeamWorks support program, or if they're even more advanced, going to become a camp counselor or a lifeguard, or find another opportunity. We've had a number of success stories with TeamWorks graduates. Heard one recently is now employed with Lockheed Martin, and we continue to hope to be able to do that. So again, thank you for your support. I think there's more ways that we could collaborate to even develop a stronger and more robust program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clutter. Ms. DiNicola.
Thank you. My name's Robin DiNicola. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Chief Student Affairs Officer at the universities at Shady Grove. And I just really want to thank Councilmember Rice for the invitation to join you all today. My comments really, I think, are probably just echoing what you've heard, but I'll just share my 16-year-old daughter just got her very first job with a paycheck. And you know how she got it? She got it because mom helped her figure out what are reputable search engines for sites so she doesn't fall into some scam. Mom helped her to put a resume together. She got help with the interviewing questions, and we practiced. And so, this is how she got the job. And, everything I know about my 20 plus years of experience working with mostly first gen college students and students who are underrepresented in college is they don't have that all the time at home. And so I just really want to underscore the importance of, we can bring jobs to the table, I hope, but really there's such a great deal of work that has to be done to provide these students with the career coaching, the preparedness, the advocacy work. You can't take for granted that they know how to do that intuitively. My daughter, I've been in education forever. I had to help her figure out how to do this. So I just really want to underscore the importance of that piece in anything that is built. It's not just bringing the jobs, you have to have the preparation element. And I just want to also echo the comments about the business community. Listen, at Shady Grove, our average age of our undergraduate student is 27, but they're hurting too. We have countless stories of students who, lost internships, who are underemployed, lost their part-time jobs, and many of them rely on this income to pay their tuition. So we're dealing with other programs in place to help keep these students in school. But what we've had to do is get creative with the business community. We also reached out and said, we need help. And they said, we want to help you. Tell us what to do. And so we created an employer toolkit model that is flexible, because we know students need flexibility. Employers want flexibility. They can't all afford right now to host summer-long or semester-long internships. So we have team-based internships and micro internships and virtual internships, off-the-shelf models that the employer community can say, I can do this. And it's easy for them to do. So, I think everything that we need to do is level the playing field. If there's just one thing that I think we need to do, all of those categories fall under leveling the playing field for the students in the community who need the help. One thing we're doing in partnership, Elaine spoke to it across the educational partners, is we're in the process of creating a shared common definition of career competency. It seems like a simple thing. That's not. Parents and students don't know what it means to be career competent. If we're all speaking the same language, that's a step in the right direction. If we could have a shared employer toolkit model that is easy for employers to engage in. And then, this portal idea is just such a great one because it does help level the playing field. It shouldn't be hard to find a job, and it shouldn't be hard to find ways to prepare yourself. So, they're just some of the things that I think that we've learned and that we can do in partnership to make it easier for the students in our county.
Robin, thank you so much for that. I think that's really, really important. Steve.
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks everyone for the invitation. I'm thinking about the older youth, the 20 to 24, who may be in the job market and might not yet be on a college pathway, and who've been devastated by COVID, already have pre-existing unemployment issues, and the jobs have just been devastated by COVID for all the reasons that Councilman Rice pointed out, the decline of hospitality, the decline of retail. And so they now don't have the skills to get into the new economy. And I'm with that area of Montgomery College, Workforce Development and Continuing Education, that provides short-term training and skills, lifeboat skills that get young adults back into the economy in a career pathway in an area that's thriving. And we've been looking at the data and participating in all the economic recovery groups. We've been talking to our employer partners, and we've begun to identify the areas in the economy that are thriving in Montgomery County, and also have entry-level opportunities that would put young people ages 20 to 24 on pathways that are not dead-end pathways, that give them an opportunity to move up and to return to college and get in a degree pathway on the dime of the employer once they get into those jobs. So we have a cybersecurity academy. We have a networking academy that includes skills and certifications, nationally recognized certifications in cybersecurity and IT. We've also looked at the expansion of biotech in our own region. And so right now on Montgomery College's campus, I want to shout out to WorkSource Montgomery and the other partners of this program, but there's a bio boot camp going on. Of course, everybody's spaced and masked and sanitized, but it's a 4-week boot camp in partnership with Quality Biological that will get these unemployed individuals into entry-level bio jobs as that industry expands. So we really want to identify those career pathways that are moving forward, that are thriving today, and then to provide them with the skills and certifications they need. Another area that's often overlooked is the fact that transportation and logistics are expanding. Amazon's bringing stuff to our door, retail's bringing stuff to our door. So we have a CDL program that provides the commercial truck driving license, both A and B. Those are good paying jobs with growth opportunities. One of our partners is Metro. And so once people get their foot in the door at Metro, they have, the entire WMATA corporate structure to look at for other kinds of jobs. So we're essentially trying to get lifeboat skills to young people, to get them on a pathway. And we want to do that in the short frame, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, so that they can get right back on their feet and get back to work and start making some money. Another thought, if I may, is that Councilman Rice led this trip. There is something called Montgomery Can Code, where MCEDC and the county and Montgomery College and MCPS have partnered to provide summer coding camps to kids every summer. We did 300 in 2019, 1,000 in 2020 virtually, going to do 2,000 next summer. And we noticed that when we went to Birmingham in the trip that the contingent that Mr. Rice led, and to Chicago, those Can Code programs began with middle schoolers, as we did, but they expanded to youth. So even the summer programs were providing coding camps to summer youth who were in those days, called it One Summer Chicago. So kids in those programs not only made some money, but they gathered some valuable skills, some gateway skills into the digital economy. So I think there's some opportunities we see from Montgomery College's standpoint: coding, cybersecurity, networking, CDL. But the important point is to get students skills and onto a good pathway.
Well, thank you very much for that, Mr. Greenfield. Let me just, I've got Mr. Featherstone and then Councilmember Navarro. Mr. Featherstone, as I lead into turning it over to you, I know that WorkSource Montgomery had a young adult opportunity program that works specifically with disconnected youth on how to get them their first job, walk them through some of those steps. I know that you're new, and I know that we haven't had our offices open, so don't want to, throw you under the bus in terms of that. But certainly, am curious if you have some thoughts about how we may be able to utilize some of the programs within WorkSource Montgomery that already exist and possibly grow and expand those to meet the needs of some of the things that we're looking to accomplish.
Sure. And, first I want to thank the council for inviting me. I'm on day 3 in my role as executive director, but, I'm so glad that this is a topic, because this is an especially important one. Myself growing up, I went through a WIA youth program and saw the benefits of it. But, one thing I do want to mention, and I agree with every comment that was made, but I wanted to add that, I think community engagement and awareness is a huge piece to this puzzle. We have to make sure that we come together as a workforce and education community to make sure that every youth knows what's available to them, how to access those services, and we make those services seamless to touch. I know that's a huge pain point, throughout. It's just the red tape that youth have to cut through to get into programs, not just in Montgomery County, of course, but I think throughout the nation. So, it's great to come together with faith-based organizations, with government, with community-based organizations, to just have a marketing and awareness campaign so our disconnected youth, summer youth and year-round youth, just know where we are and how to get to us. And I agree that business engagement is paramount. When youth come to us, they want to make some money, but they don't want to make some money to go out and party. They have real financial obligations for their families, just like, all of us do on this call. So, I think that we have to have, a robust business engagement system. And I think that's, everybody coming together. There are business service reps and job developers for many different organizations that are, one person's walking in the door and then, another person's, walking in when they walk out. So I think bringing the business services or business engagement community together to have a shared strategy that's being executed, so we're all sharing resources, can only, help better service our customers, our disconnected youth. And I think really putting to work and adding funding to our year-round subsidized employment programs, whether it's work experience or on-the-job training. And they could lead to unsubsidized employment opportunities. It could lead to, career exploration that leads to, post-secondary or other training opportunities. But I really think that, that's a real opportunity to put some cash in our disconnected youth pockets and springboard into career pathways and other training opportunities. And I think it's great to have that program for the summer youth, but I think the 90% that didn't get into that program, a lot of those folks could have probably gotten into an out-of-school youth program that's year-round. And I think that OJT and work experience, those subsidized employment funds, are a great tool for employers and their bottom lines, of course, but definitely for our youth to explore, different career pathways and try out for positions that they normally, may have not been considered for if they would have just applied on their own. So I'm looking forward to working with everybody, in this group and outside this group on how to, just continue to edify our disconnected youth in Montgomery County. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Featherstone, and thank you for on day 3. Getting involved in such a very deeply seated and long time challenge that we face. Let me turn to Councilmember Navarro, and then I've got Director Riley.
Thank you. A couple of additional observations. So we did have quite a robust conversation about youth employment when we were discussing various issues regarding workforce in Montgomery. So I know that that is on the record, and I think those issues still remain. And I'm just making these comments because I know that we're going to task our staff to perhaps put together some kind of an action plan that we can then put some dollars behind and really get this moving. So want to make sure that all of that information, all of that deliberation is included in the drafting of this particular proposal. Secondly, one of the pieces that I would be also very interested in terms of developing some kind of a proposal is that connection between our college and our county government's HR department. I know Prince George's County has a super robust partnership where they provide job readiness, skill sets, development, et cetera, in partnership with their HR department. I think that's a really awesome thing to look into. So, you know, I'm a big believer that if other jurisdictions around us are doing some really cool things, that we should look into that and see how we can incorporate it. And I'm glad that the issue of coding came up. I had a really awesome experience partnering with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation with Code a Second Language. And although it was the Hispanic Heritage Foundation, it really targeted participation of all of our students of color. And we had a number of those courses. One of them was with Springbrook High School and Kennedy High School. And one of the things we did was to invite Jonathan Jen, Viva White Oak, to also show our students that these types of future potential pending redevelopment focusing on biotech and life science could provide extraordinary opportunities for them. And it was kind of connecting the dots for students to see themselves reflected, because many of them don't think about future opportunities of employment in these particular industries or sectors. But when you start breaking down for them that, you know, they're utilizing these devices all the time, they're playing video games, this is a way to lead to coding, it's a way to lead to these jobs, it becomes real and they see themselves. So I think that we also have extraordinary opportunities to partner with our private sector, as we have been investing heavily, could even be with our decisions made for incentivizing particular industries, or some of these extraordinary master plans like Viva White Oak, to embed into that these components, because it's a win-win. It's all about a pipeline of workforce. So I believe that we have extraordinary opportunities. It seems like this could be a chance to maybe incorporate all of those assets, all of those opportunities into a particular ambitious action plan that will, I think, check the box for many of our stated policy goals as county council and also as the administration, and really get to see some immediate results. So wanted to make sure that those things were at least taken into consideration as we work through some type of proposal. And again, thank you all, Mr. Featherston. I look forward to meeting with you. I know we had to reschedule a meeting, but I'm looking forward to that conversation, as well as everybody else here, Montgomery College, MCPS, the rec department, collaboration council also needs to be in this conversation, and our nonprofit organizations. I think we're on to something really exciting here. And I again look forward to working with all of you to make it happen. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Director Riley, and then Chair Reamer.
Thanks. For those that don't know me, my name is Robin Riley, and I'm the director for Montgomery County Recreation Department. And I think this is an exciting conversation. And I wanted just to add two little quick topics. I had the opportunity, Miranda Williams, who's on the call with us, had the opportunity to meet with Jerome Fletcher with Economic Development to talk about an opportunity with a group that's in the Baltimore-Richmond area called CoLab. They are a group that marries, much like Councilmember Navarro just talked about, the academic institutions with employment opportunities and the corporate field, and making sure there's a pipeline for what the talent pool is for those opportunities and connecting them in future years. So we're excited to have that conversation. We wanted to give Mr. Featherstone an opportunity to get past his third day before we had that conversation with them. So I think that's an exciting opportunity. I think the other thing that I'll just add really quickly for us with COVID Core, even though TeamWorks has been in a phenomenal program and has really taken off, and we really appreciate the support the council has given us as well as the county executive. I think one shining light in terms of the COVID Core, it gave us an opportunity to expose kids, young people, to different opportunities that we had not envisioned before. So they were working not only in the virtual world, they were working with Department of Transportation. I think Miranda's on the call. She can jump in and talk about some of the opportunities these young people got to have with HBF, Kids Museum, Housing Opportunity Commission. I mean, it was just a host of other opportunities that we had never really explored before. And I think that's a great opportunity going into the next summer, this coming summer, to expand and really take advantage of those relationships that not only the young people built, but also that we did. So thank you. And I look forward to further conversations on this topic.
Thank you, Director Riley. Chair Reamer.
Thank you. A lot of great content here. I mean, what about, I think my colleague, Mr. Rice's intent here, why don't we get a proposal from Montgomery College for, I don't know if it's an expanded coding program, or another kind of parallel initiative, but, and I think Ms. Navarro is essentially asking for the same thing. I don't want to put, I don't want to presume, but anyway, why don't we ask for, I think we are asking today for some programmatic ideas from our partners that we can consider funding. So what would be the process to, get that back to us? Should we ask those on the call to just follow up and, come back to us with a letter of some kind of recommendation? What would you recommend?
Yeah, so from my perspective, Mr. Chair, our central office staff needs to coordinate working with us, making sure that we can come up with a comprehensive teen employment program that's focused on equity. And of course, we have our racial equity and social justice lens, thanks to the leadership of Councilmember Navarro. However, we need to be very explicit about making sure that folks understand this is in response to the report that we've seen that highlights the tremendous disparity between not only teen employment itself, and not even teen employment, I should say young people employment, and across racial lines as well. And so we need to be very intentional about how we're structuring a program so that it addresses that at the core. It needs to be built off of that. So I think that, again, that then it will have fingers that go into all of the different aspects, whether it's into Montgomery College, if Montgomery College is going to focus on the coding aspect. But there's already a blend between Montgomery College and MCPS when it comes to coding and that relationship that exists. So that's already there. I think that part of it also, and this is really important, is about, we have the bridge building part, right? So we have the, that's the bringing folks together from when you get your skills and you train people on that. And then the other part of it is connecting them to the businesses, but making sure that the businesses and employers understand why these folks would be such great assets, right? So there's so much work that needs to be done in that middle section. We're doing some of the work at the beginning when it comes to the skill building. We're doing some of the work when it comes to the outreach, but that melding of the two together is where there's so much opportunity as well. We need to have, let me just be very clear, a robust, well-funded, equitable teen employment program here in Montgomery County. We can no longer piecemeal, which is what we've kind of been doing with Summer Rise, and it's no disrespect, Councilmember Jawanda knows, we had a nickel and dime to try and get support, right? So that's not a robust program. TeenWorks, same thing. We need to concoct a program that gives all of those aspects in terms of the building blocks and steps to allow for people to go from that section where Ms. DiNicola talked about in terms of just getting the skills and knowing how to do a resume, how to pick up the phone and call. I mean, my daughter's the same way. She got veterinary experience because I'm her dad and was like, hey, I know this is a list of veterinary clinics that can do whatever. And we called them and we set up appointments and I could drive her there, you know, to all these. That's privilege, right? And so I'm honest about my privilege and know that my privilege has benefited my children, even though they are Black children. But the thing about it is there's so many who look like me who don't have that privilege. And so from that perspective, it's not just about money, it's access to information, you know, access to experience. All of those kinds of things are things that we have to forge as a part of this program. So it starts from that beginning and goes to that very end. And so there's a lot to do. It's going to require a lot of money to do this. And so we need to be very intentional about the fact that we are acknowledging this up front. I hope that we are not going to have the same conversations that we had before when it came to funding Summer Rise and trying to find the nickels and dimes to squeeze together to make this happen. Same thing when it comes to Teamworks. Councilmember Navarro, and then turn back to Councilmember Reamer. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Councilmember, to Councilmember Reamer's question as well. So I'm hoping that we can definitely have our central staff coordinate this plan. I am envisioning a plan that is sort of like short-term and long-term as well. I think that because of this crisis, the COVID-19 crisis in particular, you know, we have had so many conversations in our emergency briefings about areas where we have gaps because we don't have the capacity. And I think there is a really good chance and opportunity right now to have a win-win. As Director Riley was just explaining already, you know, the COVID Corps, I think, can be a super important model. I think we can expand something like that and look at ways that we can immediately begin to do that. And that is very much a COVID-19 recovery, in my opinion, falls within a COVID-19 economic recovery category. So we'd love to have our central staff kind of look at it from all of those, you know, lenses and see what we can come up with that is super, super robust. A very wise person said to me literally this morning, privilege should be a civil rights issue. And, you know, going back to what Councilmember Rice was just saying, that resonated with me so much because I think about, yes, what it has taken, you know, for my two extraordinary young daughters who are doing really well, but it did take a lot of hand-holding and a lot of navigating to place these two beautiful Afro-Latino young women in those types of internships, right? You know, being able to afford to pay, you know, for one of them to have an internship in New York City was just extraordinarily difficult. And I'm always thinking about all of our Black and brown, beautiful, young, talented, young people who don't have that option. And so I do believe that in this very robust conversation about, you know, institutionalized racism and equity, that these kinds of approaches, they will be able to get us closer and closer to this issue of access to opportunities. It's just access to opportunities. And so that's super exciting. And I do think that we have a chance to do something that is, you know, kind of like short-term, long-term, and at the same time as the community is benefiting and local government is benefiting from the talent of all these young people, they are gaining foot in the door opportunities, access opportunities, and then, you know, hopefully that leads for more and more of them to be in these spaces where they are absolutely needed. So I do think that definitely having our central staff coordinate this quickly with the stakeholders that are here, with our offices, et cetera, and you know, and let's see what we can come up with would be music to my ears because we've been trying to do this for a while now. So that's super exciting. Thank you.
So I've got Chair Reamer and then Ms. McKenzie. But let me just very briefly say that with Conservation Corps that focused on the employment of young, disconnected teen youth and getting them involved in our ecology and environmental sciences, all of those kinds of areas and arenas, wouldn't it be great to have a tech core that really focuses on exactly what we talked about, but it could go all the way, right? It could go from biotech to IT to anything that involves technology. I mean, the reality of that, look, I had to walk my dad through how to register for his COVID, vaccination pre-registration, right? And so I'd send him the link and he's like, I don't know what to do with this. And so, but having young people to be able to help our seniors in navigating through some of the technology aspects that we know aren't going to go away anytime soon. Look, regardless of how quickly folks want to reopen, now that we have the word of a vaccine out there, isn't happening. There will still be folks who will still need that assistance, will still be disconnected via our technology digital divide, who will need help. And so wouldn't it be great to have young people involved in all of those aspects of technology? Councilmember Reamer, Chair Reimers.
Yeah, thank you. Tech core, that's a very intriguing framing. I think we have a number of different options. There are programs that Montgomery College administers that we could expand and say, hey, you're doing 200 students now. Can you do 400 or can you do 1,000? I guess I think that those are likely for students who have graduated high school. Is that right, Mr. Greenfield? Or what's you have a continue?
Would be for the older adult group, maybe 18 to 24. But we have some pre-existing programs, and we can customize some tech programs for this group that would include, the resume preparation, the business engagement, and the career pathways in those thriving career pathways for sure. Yes.
And you could work with rec, part of the rec too.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very good. All right.
Excellent. Ms. McKenzie and then Councilmember Jawando.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity. So I just wanted to piggyback on some of the things. I agree with a lot of the things that were mentioned. And one thing that we really need to focus on, in addition to putting money in the hands of young adults now, but also let's not forget that career pathway. So teaching them a new skill. And we're doing that program right now with Montgomery College that we're able to do because of the council and the biotech. And there's so many career fields that young adults in school, out of school, those young adults that are dropping out of school, apprenticeship programs, just various trades. There's so many opportunities. And one of the things in our program that hinders some of our young adults when we start talking about trades is something as simple as a driver's license. Like, I grew up in Miami. By the time I was 16, all of us had a driver's license, and we're looking at young adults now who are 20, 24 in that age range, and they want to do skills that are trades where you make great money and just little things that are holding them back. So it's really a holistic approach that we have to look at, and multiple things that we have to address in order for our young adults to, yes, earn money now, but also have something that will benefit them in the long run.
No, I appreciate that. That's a terrific point. We really need to make sure that we're intentional about that as well. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a couple observations. A really great conversation. I would just say that, and I think Councilmember Reamer was kind of getting to this point a little bit. We need, if we could ask staff to catalog the programs we have and how many students they're serving. I think there are a lot of really good programs that have different career pathways attached to them. We're just talking about the tech-based one and coding, and then we have the work that is happening in the high schools through the various career and tech and/or internship programs. We had Summer Rise for a couple of years, and there's a whole set of employers that both in and outside of government that are attached to that, and where that's a kind of a work-based learning internship model. Then you have TeenWorks, you have COVID Core, and I think we need to kind of overlay and look at the universe of all of those things, and then track backwards of, okay, what's the number of this population, right? I mentioned the 48 50,000-ish high school age students, but then you've got
54,000.
There you go, 54,000. Okay, there you go. So right around that number. And then what do we need to do to set a plan, to have a clearinghouse of sorts and someone whose job is to coordinate and make sure that we have the right type of opportunities that are diverse enough and different entry points, if not a single entry point, into these opportunities. I think that I just wanted to say, I think that needs to be part of the work as well. And because all of these programs have different components, the soft skills and or, kind of understanding how to interact in the workplace. And they're not really soft because you need them everywhere. And I think just making sure if we could get some sort of review, that would be helpful in formulating the more comprehensive approach that I think we all want to reach the largest number of students as a COVID response. I agree 100%. I think Councilmember Navarro mentioned that and others. This is a critical response. But I think we could start. We have a lot of individual things that were good, that 400 students here, 200 there, and we can get a sense of the universe and then start building out from there. So that would just be a suggestion to colleagues and to our staff.
Yeah, I think that I completely agree with you, Councilmember Joando, and that's what I think Councilmember Navarro was talking about when it comes to about scalability, making sure that we can build these things up to the level at which we need them to be at. Understanding that not all of our kids are going to need our help, right? Some of them will have parents that are connected and parents that are fortunate. So we can discern what that universe is. That's why the data that we've gotten today has been so instrumental and helpful to us in helping us to really start to discern what that true cohort is going to be. So I agree with you. And so it's another shout out to Ms. Bryant for her great work in helping us to get to that level. That's what is helping us to drive this. Councilmember Friedson and then Mr. Greenfield.
Thank you for that. This is a really good and really important conversation. Just a couple things to add. I think the point of money in the pocket being not the biggest part of this, but an important part of this, I think is an important point. And I was trying to raise that earlier in terms of my experience that the money is important because you need to ensure that the people who need it the most are able to access it. And without the money, the question is whether or not that would be the case. Paid internships and other things are an aspect of this as well. I used to say when I was student body president at the University of Maryland, I got to do all kinds of things that 20, 21-year-old young people shouldn't be able to do, testifying before the U.S. Department of Education, speaking at press conferences with Ted Kennedy, working on $20 billion investments in higher education. I got to do it because I got to be in a position that was more than a full-time job and I didn't get paid for it. And that was a privilege that I had. We fought to make sure that student body presidents following that would get paid, to offset their tuition costs so that they could forego other outside employment, because the experience that I got was way better, I can assure you, than working at a local store. Not to say that that's not an important skill either, but if I had to choose between a better opportunity and that opportunity, and I didn't have the money to do it, it would have completely changed the dynamic. I used to say when I testified in those situations that I'm here because there's tens of thousands of students who can't pay because they're dealing with their student debt that they're riddled with, and so I'm trying to speak for them. And so I think that's an important part of this conversation. In terms of what Councilmember Joando was just talking about, I think this is really important. We are good at programs individually. Like I think generally we set up a program, we have a lot of smart people, people work really hard. I think by and large that individual program more often than not tends to be reasonably successful most of the time. We're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. It doesn't always work exactly how we want it to, but I don't think that's the main problem. I think the main problem is we have programs and not pipelines, and we don't necessarily connect these different aspects, and there's a lack of understanding of what everybody else is doing in this world. Individual entities are doing individual programs, all of which are positive, all of which are doing good things. And then there's not a soft handoff to the next piece. And so, we've mentioned a lot of them, but I'll add to them, Fund for the Future. We have this $250,000 fund that Councilmember Reamer has been a leader on, that I appreciative in working with him, along with Councilmember Jawando and the PHED committee, for these next generation technological skills for young people. But then where's the job once we create the training that connects them to, okay, once you finish in this program, here is the next program that provides you a job. And then here's the class at Montgomery College that gets you the certification to allow you to then get the job. And here's the list of employers that are sitting there just dying to hire the incredible talent that is coming from that. It's that pipeline that I think we're really missing, that comprehensive approach, the elimination of the silos. I know this is the beginning of the conversation to try to eliminate those silos and try to create that, but I don't want to lose sight of that, because it's not good enough just to put on paper what the different things that we do are and how we can build better capacity to do more of them. We have to think more comprehensively and strategically of how we connect those dots. Putting the dots on the paper is a start. It's more than we've done, to make sure everything is there. We're all talking about the same things. But then how do you connect those dots to make sure, if you're a 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old young person, what are the opportunities that you are going to have? Where do you go to get them? If you're a business, where are the people that you want, and what did they go through? What training did they get? What experiences did they have? So you can feel pretty good by the time they get to you. This is a really good young person to hire. This is a really good person, not just for the $14 an hour job through some type of county partnership or program, but after that, for the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth job, so they can then move on to a career. So, I hope, it's easier said than done, but I hope that we can move in that direction and really start thinking of, okay, what's the pipeline that we want to create? What's the goal that we have in the end? What's the start? What do you need in the middle in order to do that? Who's involved and who's in charge? And, who's facilitating the process from soup to nuts? And, I do think we do need somebody facilitating that process from soup to nuts. WorkSource to me makes a lot of sense. Mr. Featherstone, we'll give you like 1 or 2 more days before we put that all on your desk and on your plate. But we do need somebody who is connected to all the different aspects of this, who can bring everybody together and facilitate that process. And, hopefully you're there or can help us do that. And then we need everybody, as understanding what their role is and, being part of the team. Successful teams, everybody knows what their role is and everybody knows what the goal is. And I think we're missing that to a certain extent on these issues. And I hope that we can build that up. And so as we build capacity and partnerships, we're also building a strategic pipeline and a goal and accountability and responsibility for who's doing what.
So, Councilmember Friedson, before I turn to Mr. Greenfield and then to Ms. DiNicola again, let me just say this. I think that we have 5 members on this call, and we are very clear in terms of what it is as a joint committee we want to see happen. We want to see something that's strategic, tangible, something that is innovative, something that is equitable, something that's coordinated. And again, I'm not trying to throw the county executive under the bus, but I think this is something that the county council can handle. And so I would like to propose that we, as a joint committee, become the spearhead in terms of making something like this happen. Obviously, what will need to happen is we will have to have a facilitator. And I do agree that an entity like WorkSource Montgomery would be the proper facilitator. But we need to drive this ship until we can hand over the keys. And so from that perspective, I agree with you wholeheartedly. All of your comments that you've made, I think it's what we've all been saying, that we want to see something that is really outside of the box in terms of thinking, akin to what Councilmember Navarro was talking about happened in Prince George's with a $7.8 million investment in terms of a robust way in which we can try and address these issues. And so from that perspective, I'm hearing from all of my colleagues, and it doesn't mean that within that broad umbrella, we will have particular things that we know are really important to Montgomery County and are aligned with our economic development strategy, which include tech and biotech. those are certainly pieces of it. But, you know, we can't forget about the conversations we have around our climate change crisis, right? That's what Conservation Corps was all about, and talking about those kinds of initiatives. And we can't forget about that. We're not aligning nearly enough for that. We're not aligning folks in food production and all kinds. There are so many opportunities that are out there that remain untapped. And that was something that Councilmember Duwanda was talking about. There's so many things that we have yet to touch. And then it was also a point of someone else who said that as well. But those are the kinds of things where we have to be very diversified in terms of what it is that our kids are interested in and want, and what is important to us as a community, right? It's not just about those. We know those are important, the tech and biotech and some of the other things, but we've also got to make sure that all of these other things are highlighted as well, to give our children the most opportunity we can. Because as we talk about the number of kids that are unemployed and the number of opportunities that they don't have, it's way more than what we can give them in just 1 or 2 or 3 fields. So, Mr. Greenfield.
Yeah, my point was also about strategy and pipeline, and I was thinking about the importance of being really strategic about how we do outreach. How do we reach the kids who are behind the OLO data? Sometimes we reach them and sometimes we don't, but we want to, in a really meaningful way, get under the data and find the places where those kids are who are really suffering from unemployment. And I'm not sure if it's a coordinated effort through the Department of Recreation, faith-based community, nonprofits, but some sort of coordinated effort that really reaches the kids that we want to reach. And gets them back on the pathway.
So I can see that Councilmember Navarro is about to explode, because I will tell you what I think she's going to say, and what I would say is that it starts with our K through 12 MCPS. That's where our kids are. That's where, I mean, when you look at your farms rate, when you look at EverFarms, I mean, when you look at, that's where our kids are housed. That's where the majority of them are. Now, we can go through Street Outreach Network and through our cluster programs, through our wellness centers, through all kinds of other aspects, but all of those still touch MCPS, right? And so now that's that K through 12 mantra. We still have our other grouping of our young adults that are out there, and those also, we can look at some of these other methodologies of how to reach them. But in that cohort of that 16 to 19-year-old range, MCPS is the best way in which to do that. We just haven't done it, right? And it's where we're going to have to be very intentional. I remember when, I'm sorry, I apologize, Robin, but I remember when I was in high school, the guidance counselor would actually tell you about the kind of jobs that were out there and all those kinds of things. You could go there and check in, and that's what they would do, and tell you about that. And they tell you about career pathways and all those kinds of things. You ask today any person who's in high school who knows their guidance counselor, and that they've had a meeting with them, and you'll probably get about 1 per 1,000. I mean, the only time they do is for scheduling. That's all they do. And so who does that now within the K through 12 realm, right? And so that's one of the things that I talked to Superintendent Smith about years ago when he first came on board, and said, we've got to get to a different kind of model that frees up some of the folks to be able to do some of these things and give some of this support. Because then we were talking about academic supports and how do we identify, yeah, we know that some kids are struggling, but how do we start to identify more around those? And do we have the staff that's necessary to do those kinds of things? Some of that's built into the Kerwin Commission bill that hopefully will be overturned in the veto by the General Assembly coming up in the next coming weeks. But that is a key part of that. And so I will just say that we need to look at that, but we also need to lean on our nonprofits. We've got great nonprofits in our community that are doing great work. The Black and Brown Coalition has grown exponentially in terms of its outreach, Identity, and others that are out there who've been doing work for a long time, coupled with our governmental agencies as well, are ways in which I think we can continue to outreach. So that's just my thoughts. I know that I raised Councilmember Navarro's hand by invoking her. So let me turn to Ms. DiNicola first, and then Councilmember Navarro.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback perhaps a little bit on that. The comment I was going to make even before you brought that up, Councilmember Rice, is about ACEs. You know, ACEs is a model for us with more than 2,500 kids. The reason I bring it up is because it is meant to be a progressive pipeline. It stems, it pulls that thread all the way through from high school to college graduation from a four-year institution and job. And you know, it's 2,500 plus kids, but we're failing in that program if we aren't gaining systemic takeaways. And we are. I mean, the purpose is to learn from that, to embed into the system so that we can make changes for many, many more students. And great things are happening on ACEs. I'm biased. I'm part of the leadership team. But last year, we embedded a career component into it. So now we have, and that's a new piece of the puzzle that I just wanted to bring up because some of what was mentioned about pipelines is what we're working on. It's meant to be progressive career experience. You know, we can get you as a youth, hopefully a job, but what is it building towards? What skills are you building towards? Does that help you get the internship? How does that help you get ultimate job placement? There's a model, I just want to remind us, and we should maybe just talk to the folks in ACEs who have done some of this pipeline development, who can add to the conversation. The other thing, you know, when I hear about all this, you know, there's so many segments that students and youth need help. There's this aspect of the conversation today. There's internship help. There's job placement help that is needed for underrepresented students in education. And, you know, for me, it's sort of like there's this big initiative that's coming together here, which is, you know, some kind of a Montgomery County hire local campaign that we should put together with the business community, because, you know, they need to help prepare, train, and hire local talent. It behooves them to do this. It's cheaper. You're not retraining. You're building your talent, your local talent pipeline, molded into the kind of employee that you want from, you know, kind of the ground up, so to speak. And, you know, if there were things like tax incentives or business incentives that we could give to the business community to hire local, you know, in particular among our underrepresented groups all along the pathway, maybe there's something that can come together here as a large scale initiative that our businesses might be wanting to buy into.
Excellent. Councilmember Navarro.
Yeah, very quickly, I want to be mindful of the time. Mr. Greenfield, your question was so important. I think we're very fortunate in many ways because we've been layering and creating a very robust outreach and engagement infrastructure, especially because of COVID-19. You know, we do have a Black and Latino COVID-19 initiative that is really comprehensive. We've been using social media. We've been using all kinds of ways to reach those communities that have been disproportionately affected, which mirrors really the young people that we want to engage. And so I think that we have, luckily, I think that we have a pretty good, I think, robust system that we can incorporate into this plan. You know, when I looked at that data point of 1,300 applicants for the 132 positions, it was just striking because I think what we're missing is just the capacity. So your point is a very important one, and I do believe that we can, you know, incorporate all of these pieces that we've been working on to engage, because they're the same families, they're the same young people. That's going to be super, super important. And lastly, I would just say, you know, I've shared this before, how just a very passing sort of, you know, interesting conversation I had with somebody in an airplane once from India who talked about how they export human capital. And what they basically said was, you know, we go around, let's say Germany needs, you know, 2,000 dentists. We come back, we retool our curriculum, and we train 2,000 dentists, and people are placed. And I've always said, that always struck me, because this is what we need to do here. You know, we need this to be tangible. We need to be able to say to young people, hey, young people, if you go through this particular pipeline, which starts, you know, with MCPS, Montgomery College, USG, et cetera, you can then have access to these jobs that pay this much, basically. And how can we along the way incorporate incentives for that? And so we've had these conversations, like I said earlier in the session, we've had these conversations. It's on record, it's in writing. You know, we have a lot of assets, but I think that has been the missing piece, has been being strategic, being intentional, and scalability. You know, scalability is very important. We have lots of programs and they're awesome, but when you look at how many people they serve, that is where we continue to fall short. So we've got, I think, the general principles. I do believe that we have the assets in place. To your point, Mr. Greenfield, I do think that we have the infrastructure for the very in-depth outreach that is going to be necessary. And again, I'm very hopeful because I think this could be, you know, extraordinarily groundbreaking with all of you around this. And now, you know, let's just get to work. I think this is going to be great.
So I'm going to turn to Mr. Greenfield. You have to have your hand up still.
No, I didn't take it out.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So let me just, Mr. Featherstone, before we close out. Yes, sir.
Just a really quick comment. You know, I'm really enjoying this conversation. And I think to really accomplish what I think we all want to accomplish, I think there's a missing piece to this puzzle. And it may be in play already, and forgive me, 3 days in, but I think we need to hear from our young folks. So I don't know if there's you know, we have Parks and Rec on the line, we have MCPS, and as much as I'd like to think that I know what an 18-year-old or 16-year-old, you know, may need and how to reach them, I'm 20 years older than them. And it's probably just a hoop dream for me. So, you know, I think we should, you know, if we can form a youth steering committee, you know, I'd be happy to participate or facilitate in any way that I can with our Worksource Montgomery team. But I think we should really solicit some type of feedback from the credible messengers within the demographic that we're trying to reach, just to make sure that as adults, you know, we're on the same page as the group that we're trying to, you know, build programming for. So just a quick comment.
Yeah, Mr. Featherstone, that's a great point. We actually have our Youth Advisory Council of Montgomery County who is already formulated, and we could certainly make sure that with staff, we reach out to them and let them know that we're developing this. I think that they certainly, rightfully so, need to have a seat at the table and are driving in terms of what it is that we're trying to do for them. I will just share with you that I know, and it's indicative of the report and the numbers that Councilmember Navarro said, and through the various programs that we have. So we've all got experience in dealing with these children and have talked in length. I know Councilmember Joando actually led the program, so he could tell you about every single one of those 500 and then 1,000 kids and what some of their stories are. But I will share with you that many of them wanted to have a job, wanted to have something so that they could say that they had experience. When I went to one of the culminating picnics, I remember a young lady who had worked with the fire department. She was like, I didn't know what the fire department did. I just thought that they put out fires and that was pretty much it. And she said, and I learned about how it's not just about fires. And this is something that's really important. She said, it's not just about fires. They actually save people's lives. You know, the majority of calls that they have, that they go on, are about, you know, assisting a person who had a slip and fall and injured themselves or had a, you know, heart attack or something like that. And a lot of our young people just don't know that. They don't think about that. Yeah, they think about the ambulance, but they don't think about the fire department, and that's the largest amount of the calls that they get. And so it changes their perspective. And she said, it went from something where I really wasn't interested and didn't care about fire, it was just something to do, to where I thought about maybe I wanted to be an EMT. That's it right there, right? Because therein lies what it is that we're losing. Because if that young girl had not gotten that experience and had never seen a potential pathway for her in going this, that would have been something opportunity denied, right? And so what we want to do is try and make sure that we're presenting as many of those opportunity pathways for our children as possible, right? And so I think that there is no question that we're not headed down the wrong path by providing as many of those opportunities. We can shape and hone some of the directions that we head based on interest, but the reality is that interest is all across the board. That goes everything from the veterinarian to the race car driver to the professional sports player to the biotech to the doctors to the lawyers to the everything, right? And it's all encompassed. And even the people who decided that they wanted to work in a lawyer's office within the Summer Rise program came back and said, yeah, I don't ever want to be a lawyer. that's crazy. That's just too much. I just can't deal with it. And it's something where I thought to myself, and I said, I want to make sure that my daughter has the experience, because the last thing I want to do is pay all this daggone money for college and then have her decide, yeah, no, I don't really like that. I don't want to do that. It is something to say about what it is that we can continue to do to hear those voices of our students. So I hear you in making sure that we're uplifting those. I know we get a lot of that feedback now. We will continue to work with our Youth Advisory Council and make sure we outreach to them to make sure that they're also engaged and involved in this process. And in our leadership institutions throughout K through 12, student government and other, our minority scholars program, especially since we're dealing with a lot of our affected youth that are oftentimes disconnected, or students of color. So our minority scholars program that has programs, and a lot of our different schools can help in that outreach as well. So again, we will certainly take that up and make sure that they are a significant part. So let me turn to Chair Reamer for any closing remarks. Let me just start off by just saying thank you. Thank you, because when I originally had the meeting with Stephanie, my initial reaction was, yeah, I knew this. You kind of heard it from a lot of folks. And now what do we do about it? Thank you for substantiating, which is incredibly important, because there will be naysayers who say, why do we need to invest in this? People should just figure it out on their own. Well, we've got clear data that says that there are people out there who are trying to do it on their own, and the opportunities just aren't there. So we have to do something. So that's really important. And that's a really important data set. What we keep going to, that 1,300 versus 132, says a lot, because it's indicative of what we'll see in private sector, just like we see in government. But from that end, we certainly need to make sure that we're continuing to coordinate all of our efforts together, building that large umbrella that encompasses a whole bunch of pathways, but something that has serious investment from this county in terms of being able to scale up the successes that we've achieved, and also building places where we haven't had any success at all. And together, then we can create a very large, robust program that is truly addressing the needs of all of our students. So with that, let me turn to Chair Reamer.
Thank you. Great discussion today. The report was really helpful in galvanizing, a lot of creative thinking. And, this is a topic that I think during the COVID crisis, we've had to be focused on, a variety of other areas. So it feels good to be back talking about this issue, because it's part of the COVID crisis and it needs to be addressed. And so I like the thinking that we've heard today, and I'd love to see us develop a real strategy and add some funding in the budget this spring. And thank you. I've got my own unemployed youngster coming to inquire about wages that haven't been earned.
Can we interview him and get ahead of our, youth interviews?
He says he has earned it, actually. So thank you very much. I look forward to this. I think we've got a terrific direction going forward. I really enjoy everything I've heard. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for us. I really want to thank all of our partners, NCPS, Montgomery College, USG, our great Worksource Montgomery, all coming together, our Department of Recreation, folks all really coming together to help us to hone this. I really am excited about the potential that's there. So let's not lose that enthusiasm that comes out of this. Let's make sure that we get something across the finish line. It sounds like we're all committed to making this happen. 5 council members. Again, one of the things I learned when I first got to the council, be able to count to 5. So 5 council members on this call who are committed to making this happen. And so from that perspective, I look forward to growing our coalition and making sure that we can actually make some tangible differences for our young people and the community. So thank you very much, guys. You guys all take care. We are adjourned. Stay safe. God bless. Make sure you wear your masks.
Should check the stats.